December 29th, 1890. Dawn. Freezing cold. Wounded Knee Creek, South Dakota. Black Coyote, a deaf Lakota man, holds his rifle above his head. He's shouting. He paid money for this rifle. It's his. He doesn't want to give it up. The soldiers don't understand. They don't know he's deaf. They think he's refusing orders, resisting. A scuffle breaks out. The rifle fires. Accidentally. One shot, then chaos. The soldiers open fire. Not at warriors, at everyone. Men, women, children, elders. Unarmed families sitting in the snow. Within minutes, nearly 300 Lakota are dead, shot, bayoneted, hunted down as they ran. This is the Wounded Knee Massacre. And here's what makes it even more horrifying. 20 soldiers received the Medal of Honor, America's highest military decoration, for killing unarmed women and children. The government called it a battle, a glorious victory. It wasn't. It was mass murder. And it was the last chapter of the Indian Wars. You're listening to Legends of the Frontier. I'm your host. Today, we're telling you the true story of Wounded Knee. Not the sanitized version, not the government story, the truth. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. And if this story shakes you, hit subscribe. We tell the stories that need to be told. Let's go back to the beginning, because to understand Wounded Knee, you need to understand what led there. You need to understand the ghost dance. And you need to understand a people who had lost everything. By 1890, the Plains tribes were broken, the buffalo were gone, exterminated, from 60 million in 1800 to fewer than 1,000 by 1890, deliberately. The US government encouraged buffalo hunters to kill them all. Why? To starve the natives, force them onto reservations. Without buffalo, the tribes couldn't survive. No food, no clothing, no shelter. They had no choice. Surrender or die. By 1890, most Lakota were confined to reservations in South Dakota. Pine Ridge, Rosebud, Cheyenne River, Standing Rock. These weren't land given to them. These were prison camps. The reservations were on the worst land, barren, unproductive. The government promised rations, food, supplies. They didn't deliver. Corruption. Indian agents stole the supplies, sold them for profit. The Lakota starved, literally starved. Children died of malnutrition. Elders froze in winter. Diseases spread. Smallpox, tuberculosis, measles, no medicine, no doctors. The population plummeted. In 1868, there were over 25,000 Lakota. By 1890, fewer than 15,000. A genocide by starvation and disease. And then the government tried to destroy their culture. Banned traditional ceremonies, banned the sun dance, forced children into boarding schools, cut their hair, forbade them from speaking Lakota, punished them for practicing their religion. The Lakota were dying, physically, culturally, spiritually. And then, in 1889, a message of hope arrived, the ghost dance, Wavoka, a Paiute prophet from Nevada. In 1889, he had a vision. He claimed he met the Creator. The Creator told him that if natives performed a special dance, the ghost dance, the world would be renewed. The buffalo would return, the white men would disappear, the dead ancestors would come back to life. All natives had to do was dance, peacefully. No violence, just dance and pray. The message spread across the West. To the Lakota, to the Cheyenne, to the Arapaho, desperate people clung to hope. They believed. They danced. The ghost dance wasn't a war dance. It was a spiritual movement, a prayer. Participants danced in circles, slowly, holding hands, singing. They danced for hours, sometimes days, until they collapsed in exhaustion. Some experienced visions. They saw dead relatives. They saw the buffalo returning. They saw a world where they were free again. The US government panicked. They didn't understand the ghost dance. They saw thousands of natives gathering, dancing, chanting. They thought it was preparation for war. Indian agents sent alarmed reports to Washington. The Lakota are becoming hostile. They're planning an uprising. They're dangerous. This was a lie. The ghost dance was peaceful. It was hope, not rebellion. But the government didn't care. They decided to crush it. In November 1890, President Benjamin Harrison authorized military action. He sent the U.S. Army to the Lakota reservations, thousands of troops, the 7th Cavalry, the same regiment that Custer led at Little Bighorn. They were still bitter about that defeat. They wanted revenge. The army surrounded the reservations. They demanded the Lakota stop dancing, stop gathering. The Lakota refused. They weren't doing anything wrong. They weren't violent. They were praying. The army arrested ghost dance leaders. On December 15, 1890, they tried to arrest Sitting Bull, the legendary chief. He was living on Standing Rock Reservation. Indian police, Lakota men working for the government, came to arrest him. A scuffle broke out. Sitting Bull was shot, killed by his own people. His death shocked the Lakota. If they could kill Sitting Bull, no one was safe. Panic spread. Chief Bigfoot led a band of Mini-Conju Lakota on the Cheyenne River Reservation. About 350 people, mostly women, children, and elders. They heard about Sitting Bull's death. They were terrified. Bigfoot decided to flee. He'd take his people to Pine Ridge Reservation, seek protection from Chief Red Cloud. They left in late December, in the middle of winter, traveling through snow, freezing temperatures. Bigfoot was sick, dying of pneumonia, but they kept moving. The 7th Cavalry was hunting them. On December 28, 1890, the 7th Cavalry found them. 4 troops of cavalry, about 500 soldiers, led by Major Samuel Whitside. The cavalry surrounded Bigfoot's band. Bigfoot rode forward under a white flag. He was so sick he could barely sit on his horse. Blood dripped from his nose. Pneumonia ravaging his body. Major Whitside ordered him to surrender. Bigfoot agreed. He had no choice. He wasn't running, he wasn't fighting. He just wanted to reach Pine Ridge safely. Whitside escorted them to Wounded Knee Creek, a small valley. He ordered them to make camp. The Lakota set up their teepees, about 120 men, 230 women and children. They were cold, hungry, exhausted. The cavalry surrounded them, positioned 4 Hotchkiss guns on the hills overlooking the camp. Hotchkiss guns were rapid-fire cannons. They could fire 50 explosive rounds per minute. The guns were aimed directly at the Lakota camp. That night, Colonel James Forsyth arrived. He took command. Forsyth had orders: disarm the Lakota, take their weapons. The next morning, December 29, 1890, Forsyth ordered the Lakota men to assemble. He demanded they surrender all weapons. The Lakota complied. They handed over rifles, old guns, a few. Forsyth wasn't satisfied. He ordered soldiers to search the teepees. They went through everything, ripped open bundles, threw belongings around. They found a few more rifles. Hidden, the Lakota were terrified, humiliated, angry. Then came Black Coyote. Black Coyote was deaf. He didn't hear the orders. He held his rifle above his head, shouting. He'd paid money for this rifle. It was his property. He wasn't surrendering it. 2 soldiers grabbed him, tried to take the rifle. Black Coyote struggled. The rifle went off. 1 shot, into the air. Then everything exploded. The soldiers opened fire, point-blank range, into the crowd of Lakota men. They shot them where they stood, unarmed, no chance to fight back. The Lakota scattered, ran, tried to find cover. Women and children ran toward the ravine. The soldiers chased them, shot them as they ran. The Hotchkiss guns on the hills opened fire. Explosive shells rained down on the camp, shredded the teepees, killed anyone inside. Bigfoot, dying of pneumonia, was shot dead in front of his teepee. Women holding babies, shot. Children running, shot. Elders trying to hide, shot. Some Lakota warriors fought back. They pulled knives. They grabbed soldiers' rifles. Hand-to-hand combat. But they were outnumbered, outgunned. The massacre lasted less than an hour. When the shooting stopped, nearly 300 Lakota were dead. Bodies scattered across the valley, in the teepees, in the ravine, on the frozen ground. The cavalry lost 25 men, most killed by friendly fire, their own bullets, their own shells. The Hotchkiss guns didn't discriminate. After the shooting stopped, the soldiers walked through the camp. Some Lakota were still alive, wounded, crying. The soldiers shot them, finished them off. They looted the bodies, took jewelry, blankets, anything valuable. They posed for photographs, standing over dead women, dead children, smiling. 3 days later, a burial party arrived. A blizzard had hit. The bodies were frozen, stiff. They dug a mass grave, threw the bodies in, men, women, children, all together. 146 confirmed dead, but that wasn't the real count. Many Lakota crawled away to die. Bodies were found miles from the site, frozen in the snow. The real death toll was probably 300, maybe more. The government called it the Battle of Wounded Knee, a battle, as if it was a fair fight, as if unarmed women and children were enemy combatants. And then they did something even more obscene. They awarded medals of honor. 20 soldiers received the Medal of Honor for Wounded Knee, America's highest military honor, given to men who killed unarmed families. To this day, those medals have never been rescinded. Let me tell you about some of the victims, because they weren't just numbers. They were people. Bigfoot, chief of the Miniconjou Lakota. He was 65 years old, dying of pneumonia. He surrendered peacefully. He wanted protection. He was shot dead in front of his teepee. His frozen body was photographed days later. That image became iconic. Yellow Bird, a medicine man. He was performing the ghost dance when the shooting started. Unarmed, he was shot multiple times. Lost Star, a woman. She was holding her baby when the shooting began. She ran toward the ravine. Soldiers shot her in the back. She fell on top of her baby, protecting it with her body. Both died. Soldiers found them days later, frozen together. Blue Whirlwind, a young woman. She survived. She testified later about what she saw. Women shot while holding white flags, children shot while running, babies killed in their mother's arms. Her testimony was ignored. Plenty horses. A young Lakota man. He wasn't at Wounded Knee, but he was so enraged by the massacre that he killed a soldier weeks later. He was arrested, tried for murder. His defense? I'm a prisoner of war. The US is at war with my people. Killing a soldier in war isn't murder. The court agreed. They acquitted him, admitted there was a state of war, which means Wounded Knee was a war crime. The survivors were taken to a church, the Episcopal Church at Pine Ridge. It was Christmas. The church was decorated. A banner read, "Peace on earth, goodwill to men." They laid the wounded Lakota on the floor, under the Christmas decorations. There was no doctor, no medicine. Many died there, in that church, under that banner. A photographer named George Traeger took pictures. Wounded Lakota lying on hay, blood-soaked, children with shattered limbs, women with gunshot wounds. These photographs documented the truth. The government tried to suppress them, but they survived. The ghost dance died at Wounded Knee. The Lakota stopped dancing, stopped believing. What was the point? The prophecy didn't come true. The buffalo didn't return. The white men didn't disappear. The dead didn't come back to life. All that came was more death. Wounded Knee broke something in the Lakota people. It was the final defeat, the end of resistance, the end of hope. After Wounded Knee, the Indian Wars were over. Not because of treaties, not because of negotiations, because there was nothing left to fight for. The Lakota were conquered, broken, imprisoned on reservations. For the next 80 years they lived in poverty, forgotten, ignored. Until 1973, when Wounded Knee became a symbol again. But that's another story. Let's talk about the cover-up. Because the US government lied about Wounded Knee from the beginning. They called it a battle. They said the Lakota started it. They said soldiers were defending themselves. They said it was unavoidable. All lies. Eyewitness testimony from soldiers proved it was a massacre. Captain Edward Godfrey, 7th Cavalry officer, said the killing was unnecessary and unjustifiable. General Nelson Miles, commander of the army, investigated. He called it wholesale massacre. He recommended Colonel Forsyth be court-martialed. The court-martial never happened. The government protected Forsyth. He retired with honors. The newspapers initially reported it as a massacre. Then the narrative changed. The Army's version became official, a battle, a victory. Hostile Indians killed while resisting arrest. 20 Medals of Honor were awarded. Think about that. The Medal of Honor is supposed to be for valor, for extraordinary heroism. What's heroic about shooting unarmed women and children? What's heroic about firing cannons into teepees? Nothing. But the medals were political. They reinforced the lie. If soldiers received medals, it must have been a battle. It must have been justified. For decades, Wounded Knee was taught as a tragic but necessary end to the Indian Wars. The Lakota were portrayed as dangerous, the soldiers as heroes doing their duty. The truth was buried, but the truth didn't stay buried. Survivors told their stories. They passed them down to their children, their grandchildren. Oral history preserved what official history tried to erase. Historians began investigating. They found the photographs, the testimony, the evidence. In 1990, 100 years after the massacre, Congress passed a resolution. It expressed deep regret for Wounded Knee, not an apology. Regret. There's a difference. Regret means we feel bad about what happened. Apology means we take responsibility. We admit wrongdoing. Congress didn't apologize, and the Medals of Honor still stand. There have been multiple efforts to rescind them. Petitions, congressional bills, all failed. The military refuses. They say the medals were awarded according to the standards of the time, that rescinding them would rewrite history. But that's exactly what needs to happen. History should be rewritten when it's wrong. Those medals honor men who committed war crimes. They dishonor every legitimate Medal of Honor recipient. They dishonor the memory of the 300 Lakota killed at Wounded Knee. In 2001, the National Congress of American Indians passed a resolution calling for the medals to be rescinded. Nothing happened. In 2019, 2 members of Congress introduced a bill, the Remove the Stain Act. It would rescind the Medals of Honor. The bill stalled. As of today, those medals still stand, a stain on American history. So why did Wounded Knee happen? What drove soldiers to massacre unarmed families? Fear. The soldiers were afraid. They'd been told the Lakota were dangerous, hostile, planning an uprising. They believed the ghost dance was preparation for war. When the shooting started, they panicked. They shot indiscriminately. Dehumanization. The Lakota weren't seen as people. They were savages, hostiles, enemies. When you dehumanize someone, killing them becomes easier. Revenge. The 7th Cavalry wanted payback for Little Bighorn. They'd been humiliated 14 years earlier. This was their chance. They took it. Obedience. Soldiers follow orders. They were told to disarm the Lakota. When Black Coyote's rifle went off, they did what they were trained to do. They fired. No questions. And there's racism, deep structural racism, the belief that white lives mattered and native lives didn't, that manifest destiny justified anything, that the only good Indian was a dead Indian. These weren't rogue soldiers. This was policy. The US government wanted the Lakota subdued, controlled, broken. Wounded Knee accomplished that, and the government rewarded it with medals, with promotions, with silence. The message was clear. What happened at Wounded Knee was acceptable, maybe even admirable. That's the most disturbing part. The aftermath of Wounded Knee shaped Lakota history for generations. The survivors carried trauma, PTSD before it had a name. They witnessed horror, lost family, lost hope. That trauma passed down to children, grandchildren. Studies show trauma can be inherited. Epigenetic changes, The pain of Wounded Knee lives in Lakota communities today. The reservations remained prisons, poverty, unemployment, alcoholism, suicide. These aren't cultural failings. They're the legacy of genocide, of Wounded Knee, of 400 years of oppression. In 1973, members of the American Indian movement occupied Wounded Knee for 71 days. They demanded the U.S. government honor treaties, address injustices, investigate corruption on reservations. The government responded with force. FBI, federal marshals, military, a siege. 2 activists were killed. The occupation ended. But it put Wounded Knee back in the national conversation. It reminded America that the Indian Wars never really ended, that the fight for justice continues. Today, you can visit Wounded Knee. There's a memorial, a cemetery, markers showing where people died. It's on the Pine Ridge Reservation, one of the poorest places in America. The unemployment rate is over 80%. Life expectancy is among the lowest in the Western Hemisphere. This is what victory looks like. This is the legacy of Wounded Knee. Let's talk about what we learned from Wounded Knee. Because this isn't just history, it's a mirror. Lesson 1. Fear is a weapon. The government used fear to justify Wounded Knee. They convinced soldiers the Lakota were dangerous. They convinced the public the massacre was necessary. Fear makes people accept atrocities. Lesson 2. Dehumanization enables genocide. The Lakota weren't seen as human. They were obstacles, problems to be solved. Once you dehumanize a group, anything becomes possible. Lesson 3. Medals and honors can hide war crimes. 20 soldiers received medals for Wounded Knee. Those medals legitimized murder. They turned killers into heroes. We must question who we honor and why. Lesson 4. The truth always comes out. The government tried to hide what happened at Wounded Knee. They controlled the narrative for decades, but survivors remembered, historians investigated, the truth emerged. It always does. Lesson 5. Justice delayed is justice denied. It's been 134 years. The medals haven't been rescinded. No one was punished. No reparations were paid. Wounded Knee is a wound that never healed, because there was no justice. And without justice, there's no healing. Wounded Knee teaches us that history matters, that the stories we tell shape the present, that we must face the truth, even when it's ugly, especially when it's ugly. Wounded Knee is often called the end of the Indian Wars, but it wasn't. The war never ended. It just changed forms. After Wounded Knee, the US government continued its campaign to destroy native cultures. Boarding schools kidnapped children, beat them for speaking their languages, cut their hair, forced them to abandon their identities. Kill the Indian, save the man. That was the motto. Thousands of children died in these schools. From disease, abuse, neglect, their bodies are buried in unmarked graves. The schools operated into the 1970s. Into the 1970s, the government stole native land through allotment, broke up reservations, gave the best land to white settlers, left natives with scraps. They terminated tribes, literally erased them from federal recognition, stripped them of rights, of sovereignty. These policies were genocide, not by bullets, by law, by bureaucracy. And it worked. Native languages are dying, traditions are fading, populations remain decimated. But here's what the government didn't count on: resilience. Despite everything, despite Wounded Knee, despite boarding schools, despite termination, native peoples survived. They're still here, fighting for their rights, reviving languages, reclaiming land, demanding justice. Wounded Knee didn't end the story. It's a chapter, a dark chapter, but not the end. Today, the Wounded Knee massacre is recognized by most historians as what it was: mass murder, a war crime. But the official US position hasn't changed. It's still listed as a battle. The medals still stand. That needs to change. There are efforts underway. Activists, historians, descendants of survivors, they're pushing for the medals to be rescinded, for an official apology, for recognition of what really happened. In 2022, Secretary of the Interior Deb Haaland, the first Native American cabinet secretary, visited Wounded Knee. She laid a wreath. She spoke about the trauma. It was symbolic, important, but not enough. We need more than symbolism. We need action. Rescind the medals, issue a formal apology, teach the truth in schools, support Native communities, address the ongoing injustices. That's how we honor the 300 people killed at Wounded Knee. Not with words, with deeds. Wounded Knee is a test of whether America can face its history honestly, whether we can admit wrongdoing, whether we can make amends. So far, we've failed that test, but it's not too late. The survivors' descendants are still here, waiting, watching, demanding justice. The question is, will we listen? On December 29th, 1890, nearly 300 Lakota men, women, and children were killed at Wounded Knee Creek. They were killed by U.S. soldiers who were supposed to protect them. They were killed for practicing their religion, for seeking hope, for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. They were killed, and their killers were rewarded with medals. The government called it a battle. It was a massacre. The government said it was unavoidable. It was murder. And for 134 years, America has refused to fully acknowledge the truth, refused to apologize, refused to make it right. Wounded Knee is a scar on American history, but scars can heal if we face them, if we treat them, if we commit to never repeating the mistakes that caused them. The 300 people who died at Wounded Knee deserve more than our regret. They deserve justice. They deserve truth. They deserve to be remembered not as casualties of a battle, but as victims of a massacre. If you made it this far, thank you. This is one of the hardest stories in American history, but it's one we can't ignore. Do me a favor. Hit that like button. Subscribe to Legends of the Frontier if you want more truth, and drop a comment. Tell me, should the Medals of Honor for Wounded Knee be rescinded? I read every comment. Next episode, we're covering the Sand Creek Massacre. Another atrocity, another betrayal, another story that needs to be told. I'll see you there.